berated Attorney General Jeff Sessions and said he should reverse his decision to recuse himself from the Russia investigation. According to the Times, the confrontation is being investigated by special counsel Robert Mueller and, of course, raises new questions about any obstruction of justice attempts. Joining me now by phone is New York Times White House correspondent Maggie Haberman, who contributed to the reporting. So if you can, Maggie, just walk us through this. When and how did the president approach the Attorney General to unrecuse himself, essentially?
Sure, Anderson. Almost immediately after the recusal, as you recall, the president was extremely upset that it had taken place. He was caught off guard by it. It was his fury over it that, as you might remember, led to the wiretap tweets that the president issued. There was a dinner at Mar-a-Lago where the president directly asked the attorney general to unrecuse in the Russia investigation. Sessions said no. The president continued to discuss this with people, the idea that he wanted Sessions to unrecuse. He was told by some of his allies that the recusal was overly broad, and that was part of what fueled it. He was still talking about it into the fall, and now Special Counsel Robert Mueller is looking into this as part of a broader question of obstruction of justice.
And according to the Times report, I mean, a number of the questions that the Trump team believes Mueller wants to talk about, a number of those refer to Sessions and efforts to get him to unrecuse himself.
Correct, or at least efforts to talk to him about Sessions and Sessions' recusal. Okay, this would obviously be a part of that.
And the is it known what? I mean, was there what the back and forth between the president and Sessions was like? Was it a contentious discussion? Because this had happened. The president had apparently, according to the reporting, been avoiding talking to Sessions for days, correct?
Right. I mean, my understanding is not that it was, but again, I'm not certain. I don't believe that it was an overly hostile or contentious exchange. Remember, we're not talking about a president who is fond of interpersonal confrontation in most examples. But so we don't have enough information about that to say one way or the other.
But the president still hasn't really forgiven Sessions for his recusal, has he?
No, it's actually gotten worse, as I understand it. I mean, he has that is described among Trump aides as the quote-unquote original sin by Sessions. The president continues to blame Sessions for it. He blames almost all of the problems that he faces on that recusal. He blames Jeff Sessions for the appointment of Rod Rosenstein. He is not completely enamored of Chris Wray, the FBI director. The list goes on. But it all begins with that recusal. The president has not only not forgiven it, he has dug in harder and seems to be trying to torment Jeff Sessions until Jeff Sessions quits. I don't think Jeff Sessions is going anywhere.
And the special counsel has pressed both current and former White House officials about the president's treatment of Sessions. Is that right?
Correct. It has come up in several interviews.
Rudy Giuliani weighed in on the appropriateness of this move by the president. What did he say?
That I'm not sure because I didn't have the conversation with him, but I think that the president believes that the question is less about the appropriateness of recusing or unrecusing. I do know that they believe that any questioning of the president that would relate to Sessions would fall under executive privilege. All
right. Maggie Haberman from the Times, thanks very much. Here now to discuss this, Michael Zeldin, who once worked with Robert Mueller, and CNN legal analyst Paul Callan. So, Michael, did the president cross any lines with this?
Well, it's hard to know. First, in support of Jeff Sessions, he did what was required of him under the regulations. There are specific regulations that require him to recuse himself from an investigation of a campaign about which he has been a senior advisor. So really, he had no choice. And, you know, if there's a blame anybody here, it's the people who advised the president in the selection of Sessions at the outset for not knowing what the regulations are regarding people who are advisors to your campaign. So Jeff Sessions has done the right thing, and the president has no jurisdiction, if you will, to ask Jeff Sessions to go against these regulations. That said, it may also be something that factors into Mueller's, inquiry as to whether or not the president is abusing his office by insisting that Sessions do something which regulations prohibit him from doing. And we know, Anderson, from the 49 questions that were, distributed at some point earlier this month, that many of those questions go exactly to the Sessions recusal issue and the ordering of McGahn to order Rosenstein to fire Mueller. All that stuff factors into Mueller's consideration.
Paul, Maggie wasn't sure of it, but Giuliani told the Times, quote, unrecused doesn't say bury the investigation. It says on the face of it, take responsibility for it and handle it correctly. Is that an argument you think would hold up?
Well, Giuliani's trying to say that the president has the right to ask the attorney general to unrecuse himself, that is, get back involved in the investigation, and that's not an obstruction of justice. I think what's interesting about what we're finding out tonight is that Mueller may be investigating the possibility of the obstruction activity beginning at a much earlier time period. We're going back to March of 2017, and Trump is very concerned about the fact that Mueller that an investigation is going to be started and Sessions is not in control. Our focus up until now really has been on the firing of Comey, which comes later. So this pushes the obstruction investigation. Yes, it does. It's an earlier in time investigation now.
Do you agree with that, Michael? I mean, how much could this add to a possible obstruction of justice investigation?
So Paul is right to say, let's look at the timeline of things that may be, and I call it abuse of office more than obstruction of justice, because of the issue of whether or not the president can obstruct justice for asking people to do things that he has the constitutional right to ask them. But that's semantic. I think, you first go before Comey firing and you ask about let the Flynn investigation go, as you thought that might be the first act. But if the pressuring of Sessions to unrecuse himself in the face of regulations that require him to recuse himself is thought to be part of that abusive chain of behavior, then yeah, Paul's right. You can go back in time to that potentially as your start point, and then you just move forward and see everything else that the president has done or is alleged to have done that implicate this. I want this investigation to end, and I'm going to do anything I can to ensure that that is the outcome that I achieve.
Can I add just one other thing, Michael? I'm wondering also, is Sessions going to tell Trump what Mueller asked him? Because reports are that Mueller has had an extensive session with Attorney General Sessions, and it's really interesting. Is Trump going to say, what's he been asking you to prep for his own testimony? And if that happened, would that be improper for Sessions to do that? Customarily, witness testimony is secret before the grand jury, but this is a prep session with Mueller, and maybe Sessions will say it's not secret. I don't know how, what Michael thinks about that.
Yeah. Well, go ahead quickly, Michael.
I was going to say, I think Sessions is free to tell the president about his own testimony, but I'm sure that Mueller and his team has asked Jeff Sessions not to share his testimony.
Michael Zeldin, Paul Callan, thanks very much.